The human experience is defined by moments of grand spectacle, occasions where thousands or even millions of people gather to witness a single event that seems to halt the very progression of time itself. Throughout history, we have been drawn to these massive collective gatherings where the sheer scale of the crowd creates an undeniable energy, a palpable sense of shared history in the making. Imagine the most monumental public event you can conceive of, a day where an entire capital city is paralyzed by anticipation, where streets are lined 20 deep with onlookers, and where the eyes of the entire globe are synchronized, staring at the exact same broadcast. It is a phenomenon of modern civilization that we can connect so many disparate souls across continents, linking viewers in quiet living rooms from New York to Tokyo, with the physical multitudes packed tightly into the historic heart of a nation. This is the nature of the mega event, a massive tapestry woven from the threads of public fascination, media saturation, and historical gravity. It is an overwhelming display of human organization, where every detail is choreographed, every camera angle is planned, and every spectator becomes a participant in a larger-scale narrative. When you like this kind of deep dive into the extraordinary moments that shape our collective memory, please take a second to hit the subscribe button and join our community so you never miss our deep explorations into the fascinating stories behind the world's most captivating events. The true magic of these colossal occasions, however, does not actually lie in their massive scale or the staggering statistics of their viewership, but rather in a bizarre, almost paradoxical psychological shift that occurs at the absolute peak of the event. A sudden and profound contraction of reality that defies the surrounding grandiosity. To fully comprehend this phenomenon, one must first appreciate the staggering logistics and the sheer weight of expectation that precedes such a momentous day. Months, sometimes years, of meticulous planning go into creating an environment where millions of people can simultaneously focus on a single geographic point. Security forces coordinate across multiple agencies, grand architecture is polished to absolute perfection, and the international press corps descends in droves, setting up towers of electronics to beam high-definition signals into billions of homes worldwide. The atmosphere in the host city becomes electric, a dense soup of excitement, anticipation, and collective joy that seems to vibrate through the very pavement. On the morning of the event, the streets are completely transformed into human rivers, a sea of faces waving flags, cheering, and enduring hours of standing just to catch a fleeting, seconds-long glimpse of the central figures as they pass by. The scale is so immense that it becomes difficult for the individual mind to fully comprehend. It feels less like a real-world occurrence and more like a living, breathing cinematic masterpiece unfolding in real time. Every person in that crowd and every viewer watching a screen across the globe feels a unique sense of belonging to something far greater than themselves, a shared cultural milestone that will be discussed for generations to come. The collective focus of humanity narrows down to this one specific location, creating an unprecedented concentration of attention and emotion that builds and builds until the tension is almost tangible. Yet, as the climax of the event approaches, a profound transformation begins to take place within the space, a shift that is as quiet as it is sudden. The grand architecture, the thousands of distinguished guests filling the historic halls, the sea of faces stretching down the main avenues, and the invisible billions watching through digital screens all begin to recede into the background. The massive, overwhelming spectacle starts to shrink, folding inward on itself like a collapsing star, drawing all the energy and focus away from the macrocosm of the global audience and toward the microcosm of the immediate center. It is a moment where the macro completely vanishes and the micro becomes the entire universe. This dramatic shift is not planned by organizers or dictated by media producers, but is a natural, organic consequence of human emotion, operating at its highest frequency. The grandiosity of the occasion becomes a mere frame for an intensely personal reality, a stark reminder that at the heart of our most massive public rituals lies something deeply, undeniably human. The noise of the crowd, the flashing lights of the cameras, and the formal protocols of the ceremony all seem to mute, replaced by a heavy, significant silence that envelops the immediate participants. The world continues to watch. But the nature of their watching changes from an observation of a grand public pageant to an intimate witnessing of a profound personal transition. This transition from the impossibly large to the intensely small represents one of the most fascinating dynamics of human gathering. We build these massive stages, we gather these unprecedented crowds, and we deploy the cutting edge of global communication technology, all to celebrate something that ultimately exists only in the space between two individuals. The contrast is jarring yet beautiful. The ultimate public event becomes the ultimate private moment. As the central figures take their places, the external world effectively ceases to exist for them, and by extension, it ceases to exist for the audience as well. The grand cathedral or the massive stadium is no longer a monument to history, but a quiet room where a singular, deeply personal exchange is taking place. The viewer at home is no longer just watching a massive broadcast, but is pulled into this tight, concentrated orbit of emotion, feeling the sudden drop in scale as clearly as if they were standing mere inches away. This is the true mystery of the great collective event, the ability to turn a global spectacle into a whisper, to make something that is so extraordinarily huge suddenly become so small, so close, and so incredibly powerful, setting the stage for a revelation that will redefine everything the audience thought they were witnessing. The manifestation of this extraordinary contraction of reality is perhaps most vividly illustrated when we look at the specific example of a royal wedding, an event that by its very nature represents the absolute pinnacle of global public spectacle. When Prince William and Catherine Middleton wed at Westminster Abbey, the sheer magnitude of the occasion was almost unprecedented in the modern digital era. Inside the ancient, soaring walls of the Abbey itself, a carefully curated assembly of nearly 2,000 guests sat in pristine rows, a gathering comprising world leaders, foreign monarchs, high-ranking diplomats, and the cultural elite of the generation. Outside, the historic heart of London had been completely transformed into a vibrant, chaotic carnival of national pride, with over 1 million ecstatic spectators packing the streets, camping out for days along the Mall, and turning Whitehall into an endless sea of waving flags and cheering voices. Beyond the immediate geography of the British capital, the reach of the event was truly staggering, with global broadcasting networks beaming the live feed to an estimated 2 billion television viewers spanning across every single continent on Earth. It was an industrial-scale production, a massive media apparatus designed to project an image of timeless majesty, national stability, and grand institutional tradition to the furthest corners of the globe, creating a collective cultural moment where the thoughts of a significant portion of humanity were entirely synchronized. Yet, as the ceremony progressed and the young couple finally reached the high altar to deliver their marriage vows, this immense, multi-layered apparatus began to dissolve in real time. The thousands of dignitaries filling the Gothic nave, the roaring multitudes packing the streets of London, and the billions of individuals watching through screens worldwide were suddenly rendered completely peripheral to the actual reality unfolding at the center. By the time William and Kate looked at one another to exchange their sacred promises, the global spectacle had entirely evaporated, leaving just the two of them standing together in a space that felt entirely separate from the grandeur surrounding them. They were right there with each other, completely locked into each other's gaze, looking deeply into each other's eyes, with a level of concentration that effectively locked out the rest of the world. In that precise moment, there was a remarkably visible, undeniable intimacy between them, a profound quietness that seemed to descend upon the altar and insulate them from the heavy weight of history and expectation that had been placed upon their shoulders. Something that was so incredibly, unimaginably huge, an event of global political and cultural significance, had suddenly and beautifully become so small, so quiet, and so intensely close. This stark juxtaposition between the macrocosm of the global audience and the microcosm of the two individuals at the center creates a powerful psychological tension that defines the entire experience for those watching. As an observer, whether sitting in the historic wooden pews of Westminster Abbey or watching a glowing television screen in a distant time zone, you are acutely aware of this sudden, drastic reduction in scale. All of those people packed into the ancient stone building, all of those countless thousands filling the avenues of London with deafening cheers, and all of those billions of people watching from the comfort of their homes, find themselves entirely focused on this very small space between two human beings who love each other. The entire world, with all its noise, complexity, and vastness, narrows down to a single point of emotional connection that is only a few inches wide. It is a moment where the grand architecture of state and church serves merely as a backdrop for a universal human experience, proving that no matter how much wealth, power, and media attention you wrap around an event, the core component remains stubbornly, beautifully simple. The grandeur of the crowns, the military uniforms, and the royal pageantry are all stripped away by the sheer force of genuine human vulnerability. This vulnerability is precisely what creates the incredible tension that holds the audience captive during such a monumental broadcast. When two people are placed at the center of such an enormous spotlight, the risk of artificiality is incredibly high. Yet, when genuine emotion breaks through, it becomes the most compelling thing an audience can witness. The viewers are not merely consuming a piece of historical theatre. They are participating in a shared recognition of intimacy. They recognize that despite the titles, the centuries of tradition, and the global implications of the union, what is actually happening at the altar is exactly the same as what happens in any small, quiet wedding anywhere else in the world. This realization creates a profound sense of empathy and connection between the global public and the individuals on screen, bridging the vast social and geographical chasms that normally separate them. The immense scale of the audience does not diminish the privacy of the moment. Rather, it amplifies its significance, making the quiet whisper of the vows echo with incredible resonance across the globe. As the couple remains locked in this private universe, the surrounding environment begins to feel almost surreal, as if the massive cathedral and the global audience are part of a dream, and the only tangible reality is the person standing directly in front of them. This is the ultimate paradox of the mega event, where the maximum amount of public exposure serves to highlight the maximum amount of private devotion. The sheer weight of 2 billion people watching does not crush the intimacy, but rather refines it, burning away everything that is superficial and leaving only the essential truth of the relationship. It is an extraordinary demonstration of the power of human connection to reclaim its space, even within the most heavily orchestrated and politically charged environments imaginable. This sudden shift in focus from the grand to the intimate is not just a memorable detail of a specific royal wedding, it is the fundamental mechanism by which all truly great public rituals achieve their lasting impact on the human psyche, preparing the mind for a deeper understanding of the individuals involved and the broader historical context that brought them to this singular, breathless moment in time. To truly comprehend why this singular moment of localized intimacy possesses such an enduring grip on our collective consciousness, one must look beyond the immediate boundaries of the altar and examine the deep historical and biographical currents that converged on that specific day. The two individuals standing at the center of this global vortex were not mere actors in a pre-written play. They were real people whose lives had been shaped by vastly different trajectories, brought together by a modern romance that carried the heavy weight of an ancient institution's future. Prince William, born into the fierce, unrelenting glare of the international media spotlight, had spent his entire existence being prepared for a destiny defined by duty and public service. From his earliest days as the eldest son of the Prince and Princess of Wales, his life was documented in meticulous detail by the global press, a reality that came with immense privilege but also with profound, deeply personal tragedy. The sudden, catastrophic loss of his mother, Princess Diana, in the late summer of '97, was an event that played out before the eyes of a mourning world, forever cementing William's complex relationship with public scrutiny and instilling in him a fierce desire to protect his own future family from the chaotic forces that had disrupted his childhood. His journey through elite institutions like Eton College and the University of St. Andrews was a careful balancing act, a struggle to maintain a sense of normal, private humanity while constantly operating under the shadow of a crown that he would one day inherit, in stark contrast. Catherine Middleton represented an entirely different facet of the modern national story. Hailing from a supportive, close-knit family outside the traditional circles of hereditary aristocracy. Raised in the picturesque village of Bucklebury, her early life was characterized by stability, academic dedication, and a quiet, comfortable privacy far removed from the intense pressures of palace life. When her path crossed with William's during their student days in Scotland, it marked the beginning of a decade-long relationship that would be subjected to intense public speculation, long before any formal vows were ever exchanged. For Catherine, the transition from a private citizen to the most scrutinized woman in the world required an extraordinary level of personal resilience, grace, and an innate understanding of the delicate balance between public duty and private identity. This long period of courtship allowed the couple to forge an exceptionally strong emotional foundation. A private partnership that was quietly tested and reinforced away from the cameras, ensuring that when they finally stood together in Westminster Abbey, they did so not as strangers forced together by dynastic planning, but as equal partners who knew each other deeply and had made a conscious, deliberate choice to face the world together. This profound biographical context is precisely what gave the quiet intimacy of their marriage vows such an extraordinary resonant power for the billions of people watching across the globe. When the world looked at that very small space between them, they were not just seeing a standard state ritual. They were witnessing the culmination of a deeply human journey through grief, growth, resilience, and love. The intense focus on that tiny physical space mattered so immensely because it represented a vital moment of institutional renewal and human continuity, a reassurance that even the oldest and most rigid traditions must ultimately be anchored in genuine human emotion to survive in the modern world. The contrast between the grand, historic surroundings of Westminster Abbey, a building that had witnessed centuries of coronations, funerals, and state pageants, and the simple, vulnerable exchange of promises between two young adults served to humanize an institution that often feels completely detached from ordinary human experience. It reminded every observer that at the core of all our grandest cultural, historical, and national structures lies the simple, foundational desire for connection, understanding, and mutual support. Furthermore, the legacy of that moment extends far beyond the history books. serving as a powerful cultural touchstone for how we view the relationship between the public and the private in the 21st century. In an era increasingly dominated by hyper-connectivity, where our lives are constantly broadcast, shared, and evaluated on digital platforms. The ability of these two highly public figures to reclaim a sense of absolute privacy at the very peak of their public exposure was a deeply comforting spectacle. It demonstrated that true intimacy is not something that can be stripped away by the presence of a crowd or the glare of a television camera, provided that the individuals involved remain completely anchored in their commitment to one another. The image of the couple looking into each other's eyes, completely oblivious to the 2 billion people watching, became a universal symbol of the endurance of love over spectacle. A visual proof that the most meaningful aspects of our lives are often the quietest and most hidden, even when they are placed on the grandest stage imaginable. As the ceremony concluded and the couple walked back down the long, historic nave of the abbey toward the roaring crowds waiting outside, the intense contraction of reality began to reverse, expanding once more to encompass the vast, cheering multitudes and the global media apparatus. Yet, the atmosphere had been irrevocably changed by the quiet interlude that had just occurred. The grand carriage procession through the streets of London, the iconic appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, and the waves of international celebration that followed were all viewed through the lens of that deep, central intimacy that had been so visibly established at the altar. The massive public event had been successfully grounded in a recognizable human reality, transforming what could have been a cold, distant display of state power into a shared celebration of human connection. Ultimately, the story of that day is not a story about the staggering statistics of viewership, the wealth of the guests, or the grandeur of the architecture. It is a story about how a global audience was pulled into a single breathtaking moment of quiet devotion, proving that no matter how vast our world